A little over 30% of migrants are in manufacturing, 20 to 25% are in construction, and then another 20-25% are in services. So the manufacturing, you might see some of it is formal employment through registered employers who follow the labor laws, etc., and a lot of it's not. So some of it's contracted, some of it's not. It's sort of a mismatch.
Sorry, I have I don't know whether this is a layman's explanation, whatever. I never studied sociology, neither do I know too much about statistics. But you mentioned that there's a boost in news coverage in 2007.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I started thinking about migrant workers in China was when I saw news coverage about their kids going to school. And that was, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And you said the last peak or wave started in 2000. So I don't know whether 7 years, maybe that's the, not time for kids to go to school and they become a social problem. So I don't know what kind of a news coverage is about. I mean, you mentioned the percentage, but what is the coverage about? Is it about schooling? Is it about rights? Or
that's our next stage.
Okay.
Is to look at exactly what the issues are that they're covering and how they're covering them. But thank you for that that red light. I'll look and keep that in mind, because you're right. I was there between 2004 and 2006, and I remember at the end of my stay, issues about kids were just starting to come about. And
I'm wondering how much of that will be because of the Olympics too, and the fact that they were trying to make their entrance onto the stage of being a world power.
Yeah, that's another possibility, that the Olympics led to more coverage about migrants, and it will be interesting to see what kind of coverage that is. Because when you think about the newspapers as a mouthpiece from the government to the people, what kind of message were they giving to the people pre-Olympics in 2007? What was that important message?
And another reason is in 2006 there was the 16th National Congress meeting. So since that meeting, there were a lot of laws. The government issued a lot of laws regarding migrant workers in order to protect their rights in healthcare, in medical insurance, in education, in different aspects. So maybe it's because of this Congress meeting, there are a lot of coverage in the newspapers about migrant workers.
And that would leave us to ask, why did they pass all these laws in 2000 during that Congress, that particular Congress? Why did they come out? But yeah, I think you're right. It might be coverage of that that meeting.
I don't know if this is relevant, but I'm just curious about why there's such an issue when you become an immigrant in your own country, in this city. So, like, why is there such a strong resistance or to leave your hometown? Is that like a lineage thing, or is that...
You mean why do people want to leave their hometown? Or?
No, like regulation-wise. Why don't they want people to leave?
And go into the city?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a characteristic of our country that our country, the structure is a dual economic social structure. The city, the urban areas and the rural areas are two systems. So there's a big inequality due to this system. So because of this system, the rural residents enjoy far less rights, far less opportunity. They enjoy very difficult living situation. So that's why they want to move to the cities. Because if you can become city residents, you can enjoy many benefits, many welfares.
So that HUCO system that I mentioned, that internal passport system, regulates access to social welfare, social benefits.
Okay.
And you have to have one that says that you're a city resident to have access. So even if you're a migrant and you go into the city, if you do it without getting that switched over to become a city resident, which is virtually impossible, you
George Friedman, in his book, The Next 100 Years, he says that China will implode upon itself and Americans going up the world.
That China will
Implode because the two will fight each other. The eastern coast is rich and the interior is less so, I guess. And, there will be big problems for China. They can only grow so far.
Well, first, I guess my first response, I'm going to draw off of a wise mentor of mine who said, never try to predict what's going to happen with China because it will make a fool of you. And so I would hesitate to make any predictions, but I would say that China is a very complex place, and regardless of what happens in the future with China, I don't think it should be ignored. I don't think it should be viewed necessarily as a threat, but it certainly shouldn't be ignored. It seems to me that China is an important country. It represents 25% of the people in the world, and regardless of whatever the future lies for China, it will be important for the rest of us too, no matter what that future looks like. But I'm not going to it's tempting, but I'm not going down that road.
I'm just telling you what George Friedman says in his book.
Well, as a social scientist, I'm not allowed to predict.
The question was
yeah, I was just wondering, is there any language difference in Mandarin and Cantonese between the workers, migrants, and the city?
Yeah, it's actually much more complex than that even. Technically, Mandarin is the national language, but in all reality, not everybody speaks Mandarin or speaks it very well. In the South, the language is Cantonese, and they're two very different languages. So I was really frustrated doing research in southern China because when they didn't want me to understand something, they just switched into Cantonese. I knew they were talking about the interesting stuff, right? So, and then there's also local dialects. So I remember my friends from Sichuan, they would call their children slippers. So there's these weird translations that occur across dialects, which you sort of get a little used to when you hang out with the migrants a lot. But yeah.
So migrants are mostly Cantonese, or?
No. It depends where you are and where you're from, right? So if you're in the south part of China, the southeast part of China, I should say, you're more likely to speak Cantonese. But they might have migrants down there in one factory or on one job site. It's very common to have migrants from 10 different provinces or 5 different provinces with 3 or 5 different languages that are being used. But then Mandarin often or Cantonese, depending where you are, might become the language of that work site that everyone communicates in. In fact, it was funny because when I was doing my research, people would say, they would tease the other workers, look at this foreigner speaks better Chinese than you do, because they spoke their local dialect, but their Mandarin wasn't very good. Language is always an issue in China, for Chinese people as well as for foreigners. So it varies. That's a good question. Any other questions? Comments, suggestions? Well, I want
You can always email Sarah with additional ideas.
hopefully in a year I'll be back.